welcome to Power and Performance. Brought to you by Morris Lubricants. This is a place where we celebrate the very best of British engineering, and it doesn't get much more British than the Bentley. We're here today in Alex Sharphouse's workshop in what I would describe as the carcass of a Bentley. Please enlighten us. What on earth is going on here?
Well, that's right, it's the carcass. So, as you quite rightly say, you don't get any more British than a Blower Bentley. 4.5 litre, and here we are. I'm stood in the engine bay, really, you'd describe it, of this rolling chassis very nearly. So this is a project that started 4 or 5 months ago.
Beginning. As it is now, it's quite hard to imagine what this is going to look like when it's finished. So describe, the Blower Bentley. When was it built? What was it built for?
W.O. Bentley originally served his time for the railways, was an engineer, and then he started to look at making motor cars because they were coming in. War effort came along, and he started to do aero engines and things for that. And then after that, he came back to building cars. So he started to build a production of cars that were durable, reliable, to bring Britain forward in the race for the automobile. So first of all, did the 3 litre Bentley, which we have one behind us here, and then after a few years, he went to a 4.5 litre Bentley, which was just bigger engine. You could get these cars in various shapes and sizes: long wheelbases, short wheelbases, hard top bodies, open tourers. But this particular one here we're looking at is a Blower Bentley. So back in the race for greatness and British history and everything else, Le Mans was the biggest sort of race in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And to enter into that, you had to have a car that was a production car. And it was all about really bringing motoring into the public eye because it was such a new thing back then. So if people saw in the newspapers and heard about it on the radio that a particular car had won at Le Mans, would be what you wanted to go and buy. So that was the inspiration for people like W.O. Bentley to enter such race and do it. One particular guy, Tim Birkin, and he raced for Bentley's works team, drove for them, was adamant that supercharging a 4.5 litre car was the way forward, and that was the way to do it. This was not agreed by W.O. Bentley himself. He didn't think that. He always said a bigger engine was the way forward. So Tim Birkin had a bit of private backing, and basically that W.O. Bentley was left with nowhere to go other than to agree to build 50 cars to put out there, which was the rules, and that they would take 3 or 4 of these and make them into the Le Mans cars. But we've got the collection of parts, but we're going to build a tool room copy, an absolute replica of one of the original cars that raced at Le Mans to prove that we can do it. Why not?
Where does this dream come from?
It's just one of those things that when you're a little boy and you had a toy, and I had a 4.5 and you thought it was fantastic, and I've just gone on, didn't really know much about them, didn't really know what all the different models were, just knew that it was a green Bentley, and it was something that captured my imagination. I go, wow, I want one of those. I don't know what it is, but I like it. As time's gone on, I've got more involved in vintage cars and enjoying them. You start to sort of like, oh, I wonder if we could get one of those, and then suddenly realise you've made the fatal mistake of falling in love with probably one of the most expensive cars. A little bit like the Talisman project before. If you can't actually go out and buy one, what's the next best thing? Well, let's have a go at building one. And I was very, very fortunate to stumble across a collection of bits, which is not often what happens. And that's where we've gone, and the project's sort of gathered legs, and here we are. Different to me, because normally we're sort of bigger steam stuff, big boilers, plates, riveting. We're really good at it. That's what we do. I've not done anything in depth as this in building something up from scratch, so it's a lot different to what we're normally used to.
And can you describe, what the people behind one of these would have been experiencing? At the minute, there's not a lot to it, but when this is finished, take us back to those sort of moments when they'd be out on the track. What would that feel like?
I think, it must have been absolutely death-defying, really, in what they did with them, because, you say now, well, this car is probably capable of absolutely maybe 120, 125 mile an hour,
Wow.
which, if you sit in an open-top car doing anything over 60 mile an hour, you think your ears are coming off.
Yeah.
Back then, roads were bad. They're mainly gravel. There were very few racetracks. There was Brooklands, but it was, quite dated back then when these were like 1930, 100 mile an hour, average laps was just staggering.
And there's no protective
there's
gear,
no
is there?
protecting. It's got an ash frame body. You've got no roll protection. What you see is what you get. You've got a pair of steel, a ladder frame chassis here. You're on fairly thin tyres. Brave stuff.
Yeah.
Brave
But what
stuff.
you've got to remember, at the time, that was cutting edge. That was the best of the best.
The guys that did it were super brave, and they'd come back from, we'd had a war, they'd been fighter pilots, they'd experienced some really, really grim things. So actually coming back and driving one of these probably seemed like a nice day out.
Yeah.
To us to get in one and go and do that, let's have a bit of excitement in our lives. This is what we want to do. We've done big heavy steam engines. Now we're going to do fast, dangerous cars. So.
And you mentioned the Bentley Boys. I've heard of the Bentley Boys, and I'm sure a lot of people watching have. Can you remember any particular names or any stories of them doing some crazy feats in these cars?
Yeah, I mean, they gained their reputation because they drove fast, they drove hard, and they partied wildly. They were all fairly, privileged, wealthy families that had come along. So it wasn't as if they had a 9 to 5 job. They would drink till the early hours of the morning. They'd play billiards. They would, and then they'd go out and race the cars to the inch of the life. There isn't much that we put ourselves in where you think, I'm going to go out in that and I might literally not get back. Many of them didn't get back out of them. It was very, very dangerous. They certainly were the heartthrobs and the heroes of the country in the 1930s. If you were involved with them, you really were somebody.
So you've kind of, you've tested the waters with your 3-litre Bentley. This is a big upgrade. So do you fancy yourself as a Bentley boy?
Oh, of course, absolutely. Yeah, why wouldn't you? We got a 3-litre Bentley, absolutely love it to bits. We've been all over it. We've done miles and miles. We've been across France. Fantastic. But the difference between a 3-litre Bentley and a 4.5-litre Bentley is massive. That it really is sedate, and a 4.5 is quite a raucous thing. 4.5 blower is another level again. So I'm looking forward to it because I've never done. I've been involved, I've watched it. It fascinates me, the history, when you look back at really what heroes were when they were running out with 5-gallon drums of fuel and they were tipping them in a pit stop, literally you had a fag and a cup of tea while somebody did something kind, you went back out again. It's like wow, when you watch a pit stop now on a thing, the seconds aren't the in and out, everything's so fine. Back then it was a different era, but really more probably me, because it was out with your spanners and you had some, a lot of the time they raced with a riding mechanic with them, and if you had an incident they could get out and change their own tyre, and there's heroic stories of them, running 2 miles back to the pits to get a pit jack because they hadn't got one because somebody took it out to save weight, and running back and changing the wheel and carrying on and still managing to finish in a race and be up there. So all that's like, wow, I want a bit of that. Well, obviously we're not, you're not allowed to do like that, behave like that. You can't race like that anymore. But there's still a place for these cars. So if we can actually build a car that's capable of doing what we want to do, we're not going to be frightened of breaking it. It's not an original piece of history that's absolutely priceless because you've got to protect it. We're going to build this to use it and put it to its test and really see what one can do. And it'll be interesting to see what one can do because there are, more modern techniques available for building things and setting things up, and maybe we can do it a little bit better than was done back then, we hope. And there's all sorts of Morris oils, different oils and lubricants we can look at, and what we're using all the way through this in building it and in operating it. That's like a really interesting part of what we're going to cover in Power and Performance. So when it's done, the thing really is to use it, properly use it. Like, we want to go and drive across different continents. We want to go and enter in some races. I've never raced. I want to have a go at racing. It's another chapter to what I want to have a go at. And it's all really exciting.
So I'm visualising us, we've got our driving goggles on, maybe one of those little leather hats with the flaps on the ears. But before we get there, you're going to have to do an awful lot of work. We hope to see a lot more of you guys as we progress on this epic journey on Power and Performance. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.